When he cried at the thing oh my god, the thing face. Yeah, that was fucked. That was such a fucked thing people did to him. Alright, let's... Okay.
Attention crew, this is your captain speaking. The final efforts to stop the comet have officially failed. Impact is imminent. Any signs of life? Over. It's on fire. Everything is on fire. Any signs of life? Over. No. Nothing but a massive firestorm covering the continent.
If the gaming industry had to be characterized by anything on a consistent basis, it's tragedy. Having been a verified gamer for the last decade, I've become quite acquainted with just how awful this area of creative endeavor is. Numerous AAA titles promising the impossible, unsurprisingly yet still somehow shockingly not delivering. Developers having their labor exploited for not nearly adequate wages and, every now and then, splashed in a good old bout of sexual harassment, which makes the industry almost pretty much inaccessible for women. Monopolization of studios that draft development teams into the creation of stale, unimaginative and inflexible titles, usually piggybacking off the nostalgia of famous franchises, all at the cost of fantastic games and ideas that try to push the envelope of what a video game is. An insultingly blatant business practice of baiting pre-orders and then pushing out an unfinished product just to have it repaired into a finished state, only for the game to not even be impressive in said condition. All the while servicing a clientele of rabid gamers who have no regard for the well-being of those who make their games and just want their delicious 30th rendition of apolitical, point-and-click military propaganda in their Middle Eastern wargame. Jesus, what a way to begin a video, huh? But I find the most tragic thing about the industry, if not all creative industries, is the blind eye a lot of games get that deserve so much more. Titles that deserve all the acclaim and recognition so many mainstream franchises get, but cruelly don't. One of those games is Soma, a game I had the honor of playing back in 2020. Soma was made by Frictional Games, the same creators of Amnesia and Penumbra, releasing in 2015 to, unfortunately, far from a thunderclap of reception. A few big YouTubers played it, and once it was done, pretty much no one cared. Soma became the unremarkable little brother of Amnesia and faded into obscurity. It's very clear that Soma didn't make much of a splash, even though it does mostly everything right. In this video, I want to talk about why Soma is such an underrated gem deserving of your attention. We're going to split it up into two sections: the traditional game part of the game, and the story's narrative elements. As of writing this script, I'm unsure as to how long it's going to be.
Oh my goodness!
But I'd say it's going to be a little bit longer than my usual upload, and it's going to contain massive spoilers. This game really deserves your money and your attention, and I'd rather it get more sales than just give me another view on my video. So I really recommend that you go and play it. It's not that expensive and it's available on Steam. Even if you don't like horror games, there's an option to turn this off and just focus on the story. Seriously, play this game. You'll be thanking me when you're done. Without further ado, let us commence this deep dive into Frictional Games' unappreciated classic. Welcome to 2015, a forlorn year in which this guy was considered funny.
I'd watch gay porn before Pokemon. I'd rather watch Alinity kill cats on stream, and I'm not talking about vodka or anything like that.
You play as Simon Jarrett. This guy, aka you. After experiencing a reoccurring nightmare of the car crash that killed your friend and left you with brain hemorrhaging that puts a timer on your life, you go to partake in a Nakajima neurograph, a big old scan of your brain. This scan is carried out by a Dr. Munchie, a PhD student who suggests that they can create a computer model of your brain and batter it with stimuli to see what medical treatment works without the risk of Simon's actual life. One bright flash of light later, and you find that Dr. Munchie has done a lot of redecorating. You find a Pokedex, debut on Pornhub, speak to a woman in Lambda, encounter this chunky lad, accidentally join a Call of Duty lobby. You make friends with this handsome lad, find a tram, ride the tram, crash the tram, and arrive at Lambda. You come to find your friend over the computer isn't a person, but instead a robot called Catherine Chun. She tells you that the year is 2104, that you're under the ocean in an underwater research facility called Paphos 2, the last safe haven after the surface was wiped out.
I'm about to make an impact.
Catherine tells you that she was working on the appropriately named Ark, a virtual paradise that had employees uploaded with the intention of sending it off into space. You, seeking escape from the Foxhole official subreddit, volunteer to carry her in your Pokedex and launch the Ark from the Omega space gun. You set off on your quest, encounter Disco Ballhead, crash near Delta, take a water balloon to Theta. There, you find everyone is dead, and you must deal with the Meatball Men, a gang of top-heavy meat sacks led by a Mr. Meatball Man Akers. You roleplay as the CIA for a bit, try to get into the Dunbat, fail, escape through the labs, reenact your favourite movie Flushed Away, go into Omicron, hop in an underwater fursuit, descend the climber, say hi to this freaky guy, realise you have a fear of the deep sea, find the Ark, launch the Ark, game over, roll credits. Come back, we're not done here just yet. If you've played the game, and you should have because I told you to, you'll know that I skipped some important story stuff. We'll get to that in the other part of the video. For this, I want to focus more on something a little bit more technical. A word called trajectory. The basic structure of a story usually has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Stories far more focused on characters just existing, more so than the locomotion of a plot, like Night in the Woods, don't really subscribe to this. But either way, there is trajectory. When you end the game, you feel like you've gotten somewhere. You did something. Bottom line, something happened. This is the same for Soma. Every time I arrived at a new area, I can link it to something meaningful that occurred. I can name all the areas of Soma and I can remember what monster I encountered there, what puzzles I did, what dialogue Catherine and Simon had, what hazards and horrible deaths Simon avoided. There's goddamn trajectory to this game. I had it with Halo Reach, Max Payne 3, Little Nightmares, Before Your Eyes, Outer Wilds, Deadbolt, and so many more titles. Now, I don't want to be negative. I want to spend all the time possible talking about Soma and how fantastic it is. But in the words of the ever-wise dog animator person, sometimes you have to explain the bad to know what not to do. So, you guys ever heard of Furry Outlast? FNAF Security Breach is a microcosm of disappointment that was coming from the get-go, developed by a team that no doubt put a lot of effort in, but was shackled to the umpteenth installment of a series that has really overstayed its welcome. The only reason it's still spoken of is because of its meme value, or because people want to fuck the animatronics, and look, I'm as willing to embarrass myself on Twitter over Monty's pecs as the next guy, but I don't know if it's always a good thing when you're trying to be a horror game. No one talks about Outlast because they wanted Tungatron 2000 over here to... Actually, it's the internet, who am I kidding? One of my biggest issues with FNAF Security Breach, amidst all of its problems, is that it lacks trajectory. During the opening sequence, it establishes some cool areas. The entry hall, the underground maintenance tunnels, the mall and the daycare center, and then what? What happens in this game? Between the incessant presence of the bugs, the glaringly obvious rushed out endings, the laughable boss fight you have with William Afton, the ridiculous cinematic of watching Roxy be clotheslined 3 times by a go-kart, the completely useless map and awful backtracking syndrome, the stupid jump scares that sometimes just don't play, Gregory's grating voice lines, Vanessa being given the Rose Tico treatment, and all of this finalized by the fact a fan game that came out almost 5 years earlier has been far scarier and creative than anything Security Breach has in it. What happened? There's no trajectory, there's no sense that anything meaningful occurred, and I can't associate any story or gameplay moments with these areas, because I don't even know what the fucking areas were. I'm at the door, and 6 hours later I'm at the door again, but with the fuckable himbo bear. I hope the money you spent on this was— Jesus Christ, they charged $40? And people defended it? What the fuck? Unlike FNAF Security Breach, Soma doesn't have this issue. It has trajectory and meaningful events because it knows what it is. It's linear. A lot of video game essay writers on YouTube talk a lot about how great games are when they truly let you be free and open and do what you want and accommodate for the millions of player choices you can make. And this isn't a shot at them, I completely agree. Metal Gear Solid 5 is so fantastic in lieu of its nonsensical story because, as a stealth operative, I really do feel like I have a lot of options open to me in not just how I kill a guy, but in how I approach an objective and deal with it. But personally, I appreciate a well done linear game equally, if not more so. It allows for the story to be told far easier, it allows for the player to connect with what's going on far smoother, and ultimately it creates a finite experience that may not be completely replayable, but if it's a good game, it doesn't really have to be. FNAF Security Breach had massive issues because it wanted you to be able to free roam this massive mall, but also localize the game's progression down to specific points in the map, meaning that all of this stuff that they were intending for you to explore and enjoy just ended up as a chore you had to slog through to get to the shit that actually mattered. They essentially took the structure of a linear game and bloated it into a vapid open world experience with no incentive to actually use the open world as a player. Not to mention that it doubled the workload for the poor staff because they now needed to ensure the game would be able to accommodate players returning to areas they already had been. I know this doubled the workload for staff by the fact that they never got around to doing this, and you can virtually softlock yourself if you revisit certain areas after already completing them. At this point, why the fuck did they bother with an open world experience and not just have you play through a set order of levels? By trying to do both, you do neither well. Diluting yourself down to appeal to a wider market just ultimately means you appeal to no one. Okay, nope, not talking about you anymore. You're staying right there. Looking forward to the movie, by the way. I'm sure the decade-long wait was absolutely worth that shit. With the importance and benefit of Soma's well-paced trajectory established, it's time we look at the visuals. Now, the joke here is that I use the word look, and you look with your eyes, and, you know, you look at visuals with your eyes, so we're looking at something you look at, and that also refers to sort of like a segue for a video analysis. This bit wasn't worth it, was it? All the way back in June of 2021, I made this video. In this video, towards the end, I spoke about how a game doesn't need to have extreme visual detail to be good. Some of the best games people love now are those that don't boast being able to see a character's individual nostril hairs, and there are many up-and-coming titles that emulate this style deliberately because of its charm. I personally am more inclined to look at games that let graphics take a back seat out of a stylistic choice, or even because they don't really matter that much. Soma isn't one of those games. Soma, visually, is really appealing. I can't say it's revolutionary or that I walked away changed by the style of the visuals, but it did the job and more so. The beginning of the game is bright and cheery despite the wider circumstances, possibly signifying the rising hope of Simon as he walks towards what is essentially his only chance of getting to live. And then when you get to Paphos 2, that all changes. Heavy-duty metal walls, sliding doors, dark corridors and laboratories, as well as the limitlessness of the underwater abyss. You arrive feeling like you have no clue where you are or what the hell you're doing, that the next place you're stumbling to is on the whim of a hope that may not be true. We then take in the minute details, how all of the UI of these futuristic consoles and computers are constructed, the little logos of the sliding doors, the interiors of the differing facilities changing based on the facility's purpose, like how Upsilon is hallways of crude metal because it exists only to provide power, whereas Theta has softer walls and interiors clearly constructed to harbour a large team of personnel, especially considering that they most likely had greater time to do so up on a plateau where the wildlife isn't as vicious. They managed to upscale things in regards to technological advancement, but also ensured it was recognisable enough for the player to know what it was. We know what a computer is and how it works in the modern day, but we're still not privy to all the things they could possibly be doing in 2104. For instance, having a 3090 RTX, because the world at this point made a unanimous good decision to exile the scalpers and NFT bros into the fucking sun. And there is a set theme to the technology in its appearance. Paphos 2 isn't a leisure resort, it's an advanced industrial facility tended to by qualified members of staff. Most of it is unwieldy and cumbersome, formed from ugly metal splashed in a coat of white paint if you're lucky. And it appears very brutal and crude because when you're thousands of meters below the surface, you don't really have the time or the resources to think about if it's pretty, you just have to make sure that it works. In regards to physical beings, the game takes a central focus on Catherine and Simon, one of which is just talking to you out of your Pokedex, and the other one you can only ever see in the mirror, and this is a blessing in disguise, because arguably the worst looking things in this game are other human people. Just look at her. Ugh. Simon himself, when you can see him in Theta, is pretty much a walking talking diving suit. The saccades of the eyes as you zoom into the mirror are really freaky to look at, coming to the realization that you are just two robo eyes mounted on a metal stalk forced into the neck. It conveys just what you are, a fusion of humanity with the cancerous growth of advanced technology. But we'll get into that more later. For now, let's talk about enemy design. In horror games, enemies need to convey fear for both story and gameplay reasons. You want a degree of clarity, and what better clarity than making the thing you want me to stay away from look like I should stay the fuck away from it. First enemy is the Walker Gear, a UH-3 helper unit. One look at this lumbering bag of goo and metal tells you that this is not friendly, and you need to stay out of that spotlight. The techno-organic bulbous growths form a motif in the appearance of monsters from there on out, evident in how the proxies and Meatball Man acres appear in Theta. Usually the whole Resident Evil make enemies appear as amorphous blobs of eyes is overdone and kind of unimaginative, but here it makes sense. It's indicative of just how rapidly growing it is, described as a cancer, and it's grotesque and it provides all the more reason to stay away. Honestly, it's far more revolting to look at up close. Enemies are all unique in appearance despite this motif. You encounter Disco Ball Head in the Curie, Octodad's evil twin in Tau, and a giant fuck-off sea worm in the final area. All of them are distinct in identity and form. Visually, the game does what it needs to. Make the player feel as lost as Simon is, waking up almost 100 years later, and convey danger in the enemy's appearance so the game doesn't need to tell you to be scared. The environments are either claustrophobic or agoraphobic, trapping you between the extremes of the interior and exterior of Paphos 2, where you don't feel particularly safe in either. It works, and it works well. As someone with a pair of eyeballs lodged in my skull, I can attest that shit looks good. But what about as someone with ears? In the Little Nightmares 2 video, I mentioned how good audio design is comprised of attention to its music and its sound. It's ironic, because at the time I was recording on the shittiest headset known to man.
But I'm like entertained by watching paint dry. Who on the internet is looking at this and is like...
Music acts as an emotional reinforcer. It helps to evoke emotion in the player through either its absence, presence, or contrast to what's going on screen. It revolves around a techno-futuristic theme of digitalized and glitchy noises, possibly a method of contrast to how Simon experienced the world in a human body. The music really shines when you enter encounters with enemies. One such encounter, my personal favourite, is your showdown with Meatball Man Akers in the Theta Lab. As Akers gets closer, you hear this rising, waning noise. It's almost like the electromagnetism of the enemies, due to the structure gel in their systems, causes this audio interference that acts as a nice warning indicator of approaching adversaries. When you get caught, and inevitably you will get caught, the music does not hold back. Your senses are bombarded with an intense track, a massive blinking sign yelling for you to fucking run, all the while knowing unless you manage to turn a corner and hide, you're as good as dead. It's abrupt, it's sudden, and it elicits panic in how rapidly the music will swell once you're detected. It elicits that "oh shit" moment where your life and the possible fate of human existence is on the line. And the noises the enemies make? Good God. I have never played a horror game before Soma where the idle noise of an enemy has, at least for a moment, paralyzed me out of terror and morbid curiosity to just what happened to them. When you're an Upsilon and the walker gear is stomping through the corridor, it makes incomprehensible noise, a jumble of electricity mixed with a faint hint of human speech that makes proximity to it so unnerving. When you're in Theta, Acres and the proxies make guttural choking noises that express the origins of their affliction. Ingestion of large amounts of structure gel that clog up their throat and internal passages. It also makes them appear more feral and primitive, conveyed in how rapidly they will escalate from this to wild roaring.
Gerber Life is accepting applications for their affordable grow.
The sound design in this game is simply stellar. So stellar that when it's quiet, you're anticipating. Even when you arrive in areas that look safe, you never feel reassured that they're safe. You're expecting for something to leap out at you, for something to be waiting around the corner or skulking the dark, and the inaction only makes you feel tense. It makes you feel scared. And that's the key thing to horror, isn't it? Being scared. After I made the Walton Files video, I saw a wave of people mocking the genre for not being at all scary. This is where I realised just how relative fear is for people. Whilst Walton Files is arguably the most scared I've ever been since Slender, some people don't really see it the same way. And while I am the most objectively right individual on the planet, this is understandable. Mummy Longlegs from Poppy Playtime Chapter 2 is scary for some due to the uncanny dissonance between the innocence of a child's toy and the malevolence of a violent killer, but for others they think she looks goofy and stupid. Regardless of your stance on this, two things are true from this example. Poppy Playtime ruined its own potential with stupid NFT cash grab bullshit, and you're never going to be able to scare everyone with your horror game. Someone out there will simply be unfazed by it, either out of a desire to look cool in front of their mates, or out of genuine sincerity. This is something that Mr. Joseph Anderson posits in his video about Soma. Fun fact about Joseph Anderson, every time I hear a video game take from him, I want to drive my head through fucking drywall. Not only has Joseph Anderson committed the unforgivable sin of saying the Outer Wilds ending was for nothing.
Well, that was a beautiful sequence, but for the story, I'm not sure if that's completely satisfying, but
Shut the fuck.
He also thinks that Soma just isn't a scary game, that the encounters you have with enemies didn't faze him and ultimately detracted from the fantastic story it was telling.
It's screaming at you like a nervous dog. Hey, be scared. You should be scared right now. Are you scared? You scared? You scared yet? Instead of actually scared.
Shut the fuck up! Oh my god!
He's entitled to his opinion, even if it's completely wrong, because Soma is a terrifying game. It's one of the most frightening horror experiences I've ever played, and I can't help but feel that Joseph Anderson was that one guy trying to look cool in the face of terror. I mean, fuck, did we even play the same game, man? In Soma, after you spend time walking around examining the dilapidated hallways of your prison, you reach an encounter with one of the many enemies that will try to kill you in the game. Each encounter is a tense stomach churner of silent panic as your adversary patrols past, the prospect of death following it with every step. In tandem with the waning music and glitching visuals, tension rises as they do, and it helps to make the player shift in their chair with discomfort. Each enemy behaves differently, with a different gimmick that forces you to play dangerously, whether it be avoiding eye contact or having to scurry undercover before you get eaten. Your only way to survive, to ensure the survival of humanity, is to hide and, if you're unlucky enough to be caught, run.
I was running!
There's a reason why the developers programmed in an option to turn this off. One of the best encounters in this game that I can't help but feel Joseph Anderson didn't engage with was the Theta Lab with Mr. Meatball Man Akers. I've brought this up before because this one encounter is not just the most terrifying in Soma, but one of the most horrifying encounters in a horror game I've ever had. There's a reason why there is a whole reaction compilation dedicated to this specific monster.
I'm killing you. I'm killing you. I don't care about anything else. I don't give a shit about anything else. It doesn't, there is no like, oh, he's running? I'll back off a little. Nope, it's just...
Before you even arrive at Theta, Akers is being hinted at. In one of the stations at Delta, the walls are covered in bloody scrawls, and 2 rotting eyes lie on the floor. They're Akers' eyes, ones that he forcibly removed after ingesting copious amounts of structure gel. A couple of recordings talk of how he attacked the crew that came by to relocate him, of how he believed he was chosen by the WoW to shepherd them all into a comatose paradise.
Do you hear me speaking? Of course you do. I wanted to let you know that I know. You didn't blindly beg me out of the herd. The slow waves of Delta crashing against the shore have an undertow that pulls you into a slumber. It's a beautiful thing, and I won't be selfish. I will help. Tuck them in, watch them sleep. They too will find peace within the universe of the WoW.
Once you're in Theta, you encounter the proxies, monoliths of dark bulbous flesh that can't see you, but are able to hear you. You have to navigate a dark maze of scattered tools and equipment that will alert the proxies if you kick them. Your objective is to restart the internet mainframe, and it's done by loudly hitting a switch and then hiding before hitting it again. Both instances attract the proxy to your location. It makes it clear that silence is paramount to survival in Theta. You even see Akers wandering the barracks at the end of the corridor in search of new victims. The only downside to this section is Catherine just kind of telling you about them, casually like it's a Pokemon entry, which I don't recall having heard when I first played it, so it's kind of bizarre that I even knew what to do.
Simon, the last report filed by the staff mentioned struggling with something called a proxy. The proxy we killed was blind, just like Akers, but it listens. Careful, we spotted 2 more by the infirmary.
What do they look like?
Not sure. It seems to be human enough to pass for a crew member at a distance. Tall, dark, and ultimately faceless seems to be what to look out for.
Keep my eyes open.
When I was on my second playthrough when I heard this, I was a bit disappointed because it killed the tension quite a lot, but the encounter itself made up for it. By the time you get into the Theta Lab, you know that a lethal rendezvous is coming. The moment you arrive and a door shut behind you, you are greeted with a feral cry followed by a vent crashing open. You know that you are no longer alone. You hurry to the elevator for a quick escape, but to your dismay, the access panel is broken. The necessary parts are locked away in a room and kept in the dead clutches of a staff member that remained behind so the others of the facility could evacuate. Once you see the cracked window, you already know what to do, and the risk of doing it is equally apparent. That familiar waning music and glitching screen arrive to mark the arrival of Mr. Meatball Man Akers. As you hide, you gaze upon the visage of a towering figure encrusted in swollen flesh and thronging pustules, a guttural creature that stalks the halls, choking and retching. A monster with impeccable hearing that is able to even detect the sound of a flashlight turning on and off. A monster that, if you're unlucky enough to be caught, you realize is faster than you. Once you retrieve the necessary parts and suffer through the anxiety of Akers walking around, you make your way over to the security office to format the chip. And to your absolute joy, you are now stuck in a maze with a monster that can hear you turn your flashlight on. You arrive at the security office and format the chip, but as it formats, you see Akers patrolled directly outside your room. Getting back to the elevator is tense, as you have to time when you sneak out to avoid bumping into him along one of the dark corridors. Once you're back at the elevator, the anxiety doesn't end. Putting in the chip and securing the latches is also audible to Akers, so you have to wait until you're absolutely sure he's gone to do it. Once the elevator doors open, you have to hurry inside and hit one of the elevator buttons as he charges the closing doors and tries to break inside.
No.
On both playthroughs, even when I knew what I was up against, this section did not fail to leave me encumbered with stress. Without any jump scares or hammed up cutscenes, you're pitted at the end of your seat time and time again, sometimes when there are not even any enemies around. It's almost masterful how they construct these encounters. Almost masterful. You see, Meatball Man Acres is a fantastic enemy. The way he's constructed into phases where he'll go into hiding when you're silent and will then spawn nearby the moment you make noise showcases how much effort went into programming this specific monster. But not all the enemies in this game are exactly as great. It's the one thing that holds the game back from being a masterpiece, in my opinion. It's still scary for the most part, probably because I'm a notorious pussy, but some of them leave more to be desired. Horror games aim to scare you. That's the whole reason why they exist. They put you in scenarios with monsters that you have to avoid in order to not die. Generally a good thing for most people nowadays. But one of the biggest worries is that a player may die too often, and as a result, become too familiar and frustrated with the monster itself. You see, you can't be both frustrated and scared at the same time. It's one or the other. Either you're pissing yourself, or you're getting pissed.
Freddy! Freddy! Oh my God, Freddy!
If it's the latter, the player's no longer going to be scared of your game, and this is usually the result of dying numerous times to a single enemy. Outlast 2 is notorious for how frustrating it can be. The prior installment made navigation very easy. As the environment was mostly interior, it wasn't hard to see where you were meant to go or what you were supposed to do to avoid the monster. But in Outlast 2, you had no idea where to go. You'd run into trees assuming you'd have to escape that way, just to realize, oh, the correct designated escape tree is way off to my right, and in order to try again, we have to watch your character endure cock and ball torture for the 20th time.
Cock and ball torture, CBT.
In Soma, the game is fairly forgiving. You can get hit numerous times before you die, and if you somehow are bad enough to die, the checkpoints cushion you well enough that you can get right back into the action. Some would suggest that because the game is so forgiving, death isn't really that scary, that if you die, you have the comfort of knowing you're not going to get sent back that far. I disagree. You become so immersed in the terror that it doesn't really matter where you'll be sent to if you lose. What's important is not losing, period. Soma has this remarkable ability to make you feel that your life and the possible future of humanity is really on the line. After all Simon goes through in this game, you want to see him get some sort of happy ending out of his hellscape. If you're playing horror games without trying to immerse yourself, only bothering to focus on the intricacy of its checkpoint system, you're never going to enjoy the experience that this genre exists to create. Secondly, having such forgiving checkpoints works well to keep the player moving forward. You don't want the player to be habituating to the encounter, you don't want to give them too much time to start getting annoyed that they're dying so often. So the best thing you can do is offer these safety nets in a hope that the player will quickly move on to the next area. You don't want them to ever feel safe. And third, the death scene you get when you die is something else. Watch what happens if you fall into the abyss at Omicron without a pressure suit. With all this in mind, however, the game's encounters risk tipping that balance from pissing yourself to getting pissed. As I said before, each encounter has a gimmick. The monster will have some sort of bizarre method to catch you that you will have to subvert in differing ways. The first encounter is with the Walker Gear. It serves as an excellent tutorial monster. It's slow, it can hardly hear you, and the range of its vision is clearly marked by its spotlight. It doesn't need to be any more complicated than this to settle you into what you'll be dealing with along the way. Then you get to the Flesher, the disco ball head guy that stalks the wreckage of the Curie. After arriving at Lambda to talk to Catherine, you hear a scream followed by a flash of light. Going in to investigate reveals that Disco Ball Head is still around, and Catherine quickly tells you to not look at it. Hiding in a corner for a few seconds will result in Disco Ball Head teleporting away. This is a really good preamble to your eventual encounter. You've been told to not look at him, and that's all you really need to know. As a premise for a monster, it's fucking terrifying. You know when you see a spider on the wall of your room? Oh my god! Your first reaction is to kind of just stare at it? That's because we pay selective attention to stimuli that we find scary. We don't want the source of our fear to get closer to us, and as a result, we dedicate our focus to it. Forcing the player to ditch this fear mechanism and take your eyes off a thing that's scaring you is a genius inverse of the usual Weeping Angels mechanic. In theory. You see, the interior of the Curie is a mess of interconnected rooms surrounding a single corridor. It's extremely claustrophobic, and knowing that you'll have to circumvent a monster in that area is pretty scary. The moment you encounter Disco Ball Head for the first time is a tense moment. You spend all your time with eyes to the floor as you try to navigate around him. The only problem is he can still fucking see you. While you're dancing around on the floor with your ass up in the air, he's still moving towards you. And by the time you realise this, you're already trapped in a corridor, and you can't get around him because you can't see how far away he is from you. On my second playthrough, I got stuck here and knocked out because I didn't realise that this valve on the wall was what you needed to turn to get the ladder down. I'm sure it's true to submarine architecture, but simultaneously it's annoying as shit to see when my screen is doing this. What I thought would be a tense, puzzle-like section of looking at Disco Ball Head to bait his movements away from choke points became, instead, a lame-ass chase sequence. I just stand in the middle of a room and wait for him to come in through one door before sprinting out the other side and going around him. Hiding is infinitely scarier than running. When I'm running, I'm in control, and I'm much faster than most enemies in this game. But when I'm hiding, I'm at uncomfortably close distances to the enemy. I'm at their oblivious mercy, and I feel completely helpless. What could have been one of the best encounters in this game was instead something I just held shift to get around. And unfortunately, it doesn't end there. In the last stretch to the Omega Space Gun, you have to cross open ground while the giant fuck-off worm, the Leviathan, stalks you. If you're out in the open for too long, it will swoop down and pick you up before spitting you out a little way back down the path. You're meant to be taking cover when you feel like it's too close, scurrying under narrow crawl spaces as it passes overhead. The only problem is the game says fuck all about doing this. In the stretch before this section, the game tells you that you have to stick to the lights and you won't be attacked.
Tao, can you hear this? Anyone there?
This is Tao. Who is this?
This is Ian Peterson of Theta calling. I got a team with me and we're about half a kilometer from Tao.
The storm comes and goes. Instruments show the weather is relatively fair right now. You should move out as soon as possible. Stick to the lights. The critters should leave you alone.
This works in practice, but nothing is said that the Leviathan is still going to target you if there are no lights. This lack of information led to me completely brute forcing this area on my first playthrough without dying, getting picked up over and over again whilst completely confused as to why I was being attacked when next to the lights. It's bizarre that this was an issue, because the clear fix for me would have been to just have the lights go out during the chase, and this would have been infinitely scarier. This is the problem with Disco Ball Head Section 2, because the game gives you information on how to deal with these enemies, and then it punishes you for adhering to it. And sometimes, it just doesn't say anything at all. Despite how terrifying it is to be continuously chased from room to room by Octodad's evil twin, the game never gives you any information on how to slow him down. Apparently staring at him stops him in place briefly and he's impeded by doors, but this is never explained to you in the game itself, it's just on a wiki page somewhere. What's even more bizarre than this is that he seemingly is unaware to your presence this whole time. In this clip, I don't correctly judge where he is and accidentally sprint right into him. If this had been Acres, I'd immediately have been detected and the music would have started playing. For this guy, however, nothing really happens. He spends the entire time chasing you from door to door, but seemingly he doesn't even know you're there. It's this bizarre lack of explanation of the rules and the little consistency they have that threatens to frustrate you instead of scare you. You see, people always talk about the fear of the unknown. Not knowing what comes next is uneasy. I mean, it's not exactly reassuring that the future of a world could end in 50 years for as long as idiots like Steven Crowder keep denying climate change and sucking corporations' dicks all day. In theory, I'd argue the unknown is scarier than the known, because with less certainty comes less control, and with less control comes greater fear. Being in front of a monster and not knowing what to do is paralyzing and has the potential to create some really intense and stressful moments. But if my failures are the result of arbitrary rules that the game's going to ignore when convenient, I'm going to be hard pressed to stay immersed in what's going on. On my second playthrough, I was more frightened at every encounter because I knew the rules. Having to sprint between cover and ducking in just in time as the Leviathan swims overhead made me paranoid to venture out again. And knowing that Octodad's evil twin would chase me from room to room without relenting made opening the blast door even more terrifying to do. I knew what to expect and, as a result, I knew what to fear. I can understand that not everyone enjoyed the traditional horror aspects of this game for this reason. Personally, I think that Soma provides greater paralyzing fear than most horror games of our current generation. While you don't have to agree with the most correct and objectively right guy on the planet, I do think it's genuinely a bit dumb for people like Joseph Anderson to just write it off as not scary without even really looking into it. Mr. Joseph Anderson, if you're seeing this, I hope you're doing well. And I hope you also understand that any hostility around my disagreement over a video game from 2015 is purely hyperbole and it's played up just for jokes. Although, if I hear you make a third bad take on video games that I like,
I'm about to get wicked on your ass.
You know the blue curtains meme? That god-awful and stupid idea about how English teachers are constantly overanalyzing and the intentions of the author are usually far simpler and straightforward than what we're taught? Well, as a kid, I subscribed to that theory. That's right, the guy who makes video essays about video games was once a stupid teenage idiot. Just wait until you find out I used to make jokes about using flamethrowers on furries too. But even now, I'm always hesitant to use the word analysis. It sets an expectation that the person carrying out said analysis is actually educated and not a PNG of a dog espousing his opinions on media with unfunny memes to keep the Zoomers engaged. I also think the word lends itself to a far more formal nature of formatting, but video essays can be as informal as shit and people will still want to hear what I have to say about it. For a story as thought-provoking as Soma, however, the only way to do it justice is to really take a look at what it says both explicitly and implicitly. So, with all the charisma of a 60-year-old English teacher begrudged with life and sight issues, I'm going to use this cosplay to delve into the depths of Soma's underwater tale. Ironically enough, this may get a little dry. The tale of Soma follows that rough plotline I established earlier. You wake up 100 years after your brain scan, and you have to help launch the Ark into space as humanity's last hope for survival, and also your last hope of getting out. This is your main drive and motivation after you meet Catherine. It compels you to keep going no matter what monster may block your path, and it's great because this is really all you need. If someone is playing Soma and is only really taking things in on a complete surface level like it's some disaster flick, they're still intrigued and compelled to play without needing to unpack the implicit meanings of things on their own. As stupid as the Blue Curtains meme is, there are a lot of media pieces that become so focused on symbolism and ulterior meaning, they neglect to make the basic story enthralling enough for me to bother looking deeper. Subtext is great, but if the text itself isn't good, I'm not really going to care about how much effort you put into background info in the hopes of MatPat acknowledging your existence. Looking at you, hello neighbour. Contrary to popular belief, some of us still remember you. The story at Soma's forefront is about the difficulty of rationalizing the jarring existence of a post-apocalyptic world with only the perspective of someone who has lived long before. Simon is exactly like us when he wakes up in Upsilon, confused, uncertain, and a little bit scared. We, like Simon, only have current year's frame of reference and boast no more or less experience in this situation than he does. I mean, after all, the game is set in 2015 and most people would have been playing it in that year. We are perfectly in tandem with him and his experiences. Catherine, our companion at Lambda, is a veteran researcher that's far more familiar with the scientific advancements and apocalyptic conditions of 2104. She's jovial, focused, and sometimes a little awkward in delivery. She's described by many of her colleagues as kind of weird, and her interactions with Simon very easily showcase this. She's also a Class A arsehole. Like, God, okay, listen, this is really abrupt, but I get tired of all the people complaining about how stupid they find Simon, about how he didn't pick up on every little nuanced detail pertaining to important stuff in the world, when he's only just fucking woke up in it. Everyone loves Catherine, no one pays attention to how she just completely disregards Simon's fragile state as he comes to terms with what he is. I get that the fate of the world is on the line, but bloody hell, is it that hard to empathize with the guy for once? Maybe fucking listen to him when he's opening up his mouth about how weird it is that he can speak without the fucking mouth?
I've known ever since I woke up at Upsilon. It just keeps suppressing it. Like my brain doesn't want me to think about it. It's really getting hard not to think about it.
Yeah. Could you maybe hit that switch over there so we could get moving?
Oh, yeah, sure.
1 minute later.
Could have been in the Mariana Trench. It'll hold for anything.
That's great.
And then we can start listening to other people when they talk, because that's how conversations work.
The story involves us traversing terrifying obstacles and frightening monsters in the hopes of finding some happy ending to a world that's seemingly devoid of any. This is always your motivation, no matter what the game throws at you. But along the way, you undergo some interesting experiences. Things that are far more subtle than the story of humanity's last hope at survival. When arriving in Upsilon, you come across a robot trapped on a conveyor belt that speaks to you in a human voice. It asserts that it's a man known as Carl Semkin, a man that requires immediate medical attention. It only appears to become irritated when you suggest mechanical intervention is likely more appropriate.
Won't a mechanic make more sense?
Fuck off. Wandering through the nearby corridor unveils a decomposing corpse that had been struck in the side of the head. Examining the staff badge still pinned to the uniform reveals that it was once a man known as Carl Semkin. At first, you're understandably confused, and this is only contextualized once you meet with Catherine. Paphos 2 was overseen by an artificial intelligence unit known as the WOW, the Warden Artificial Intelligence Unit, a creation of Carthage Industries that was monitored and controlled from a secret site in the Abyss known as Alpha. It was tasked with seeing to the menial upkeep and general maintenance of a facility, able to physically manifest and interface with systems through that crucial elixir known as structure gel. Once the surface was struck by the Telos comet, however, its primary purpose drastically shifted to preserving the remnants of humanity. It modified pilot seats, apparatus used by staff to control repair drones, in order to take crucial brain scans, and it then began to rapidly upload these brain scans into robotic bodies, such as the UH-3 helper unit that claims to be Carl Semkin in Upsilon. It acts as a snapshot in time. It's why Carl had no recollection of his gruesome demise, or the fact that Amy Azaro, his work colleague, had long since fled Upsilon. And it also explains you. When we sat down in Dr. Munchie's chair in 2015, all we saw was a flash of light, and then we awoke in Upsilon. You are that very brain scan, uploaded to a body fusing the corpse of Catherine's dead colleague and possible romantic partner with the technological interface of her diving suit. In fact, when you get to Theta, it's revealed that Dr. Munchie had kept Simon's brain scan as a legacy template for the construction of artificial intelligence. This only happened because, almost a month after the initial scan, Simon Jarrett died from the failed treatment.
The model was sound. It should have worked.
It's not your fault, David.
I really wish things had turned out differently.
Yeah, me too.
I was supposed to save you.
Hey, you got my brain on file. Maybe you can put it to some use.
Yeah, who knows? You'd be okay with that? Using it for my research?
Sure. It's like a part of me lives on or something. Like a donated organ. You know what sucks about dying?
What?
The crash. Everything up till now. The brain damage. You guys, everything. Has made my life so much more real. I started thinking about all the things I was going to do. I'd never been more excited to be alive. All that hope. Wasted.
You are naught but a continuation of that snapshot in time that had been kept in storage for almost a century. Just like Carl Semkin, you are a mockingbird, a robot or machine that acts as a reconstruction of an individual by uploading a brain scan to the vessel's cortex chip. In the case of Simon Jarrett, it would be the cortex chip implanted in the corpse inside the diving suit. And this is what the background of Soma intends to explore for those willing enough to look closely. What does it mean to be human? Catherine claims it's impossible to answer, but Catherine's a dickhead, so I don't really care what she has to say. Throughout the game, you come across numerous bizarre instances of the whale's handiwork. Some of them are enemies. The Walker Gear in Upsilon is believed to host the corrupted brain scan of Imogen Reed, a Pathos 2 staff member that experienced a seizure during a procedure which results in the incomprehensible sounds and behaviour that the Walker Gear elicits. It may even explain why it attacks you and seemingly calls out your name amidst its garbled speech. The body you inhabit is that of Imogen Reed, and it's aware of the brain scan that was uploaded into it. In fact, all of the monsters you face are products of the WoW through its skewed definition of what a human, of what life, is. Octodad's evil twin is a staff member stationed in the Abyss known as Jin Yoshida, who put on a power suit that had been tampered with by the WoW and mutated him into the mindless and hostile creature that chases you through the halls of Phi. With these examples in mind, the question is kind of easy. What does it mean to be human? Certainly not fucking that. But then we get to some far more mellow individuals. Sitting immobile outside the entrance to Site Theta is a mockingbird, one that claims to be an American engineer known as Robin Bass. She seems confused and asks as to where everyone is, clearly expecting to see more people on the Ark. You are equally as confused as Simon at this moment. You tell her that she's on the Ark and this relieves her of her troubles. The game then gives you the option to disconnect her power and kill her, or let her sit there and enjoy what she thinks is the virtual paradise that Catherine promised for the staff. She seemed content enough to keep going, so I decided to leave her be. After all, she had sat there for a long time already without going insane, so it didn't really feel like it was my call to make in that moment. But this isn't the end of this line of curiosity. Once we enter Theta, we're quickly disappointed that no one is there. As you inspect the eeriness of the empty dorms, you come across the works of a man known as Mark Sarang, a fellow Carthage Industries employee. Earlier on, you would listen to a recording taken as part of a survey for people's perspectives on living out a virtual life inside the Ark. After having Catherine clarify that it wouldn't look as nearly as shit as the metaverse...
Do you have a favorite feature to use in here?
Yeah.
Something that you think is very cool?
Check this out.
Bajinga dinky dinky dongers, look at those wonkers.
Mark says this.
What are your thoughts on the art project?
The idea is just incredible. By every definition. It really makes you think about what it means to be human.
What makes you say that?
Beyond the basics. Beyond the superficial. I'm convinced there's something with even greater value. You have provided a platform, which is not necessarily restricted to our digital progeny, but a means of actual survival. It's my sincerest belief that we can go on living through the reality of continuity.
The reality of continuity. The delivery seems quite ethereal, doesn't it? Passionate. He's definitely referring to something beyond just some poetic language. And it's in his room in Theta that we discover what he's referring to.
Did you know that the human body consists of up to 75 trillion individual cells? They typically don't stay with us till we die. Some live a few days, while others live a few years. We're not affected by their short lifespans, as they're replaced by new cells which help sustain our bodies. I don't think anyone would argue that we ever lose our persona due to this process. Yet we are clearly in a constant state of transformation. Then how do we remain the same? A continuous flow of thought and perception keeps an unbroken chain of continuity that we know as our self. Our conscious mind is not the pattern of our brain, but a continuous emergent entity based on that pattern. When Dr. Chun populates the Ark, she is capturing a moment of our existence and placing it inside the digital world. Soon you and your digital you will grow apart due to diverging experiences, but for a tiny window, you are the very same. With unbroken continuity, it will live on. A fulfilling life, no doubt, no less real than the one from which it was plucked. Now remember, you are not your body. You are the emergent entity. That entity just happens to occupy two places at once for a while. If you took away your body, you would simply be the only one you can be. The you inside the Ark. Let your body die and continue on in the digital paradise among the stars.
It's an insane idea, isn't it? The idea that you can merge with your brain scan copy by killing yourself the moment after it is taken is absurd to any one of us right now. But the game is not set right now. It's set in a period where human existence has been completely jeopardized by an unforeseen event that couldn't have been prevented. In this insane world, this idea is sane. This recording is the articulate rambling of a well-educated and terrified man trying to rationalize a happy ending out of a scenario where there just isn't one. A man that places all of his hope of meaningful existence into a way out that just doesn't exist. A man that creates a hopelessly hopeful line of thinking known as the continuity. One that becomes the perfect escapist fantasy for many members of staff that, just like Sarang, go on to kill themselves after the scan.
This thing on? Can everyone hear me?
Go ahead, Strom.
Listen up, all members of staff. The ARC project has caused a lot of arguments the last few months. I'm not going to pretend I understand what the hell Sarang talked about and how his continuity suddenly made sense to kill yourself. For the fucking love of God, or whatever you think is important, don't kill yourself. This place is miserable enough. Don't force your friends to clean up your blood.
One of these members was Robin Bass, and it's why she asks you where everyone in the Ark is. That optimistic hope that drove her to kill herself carried over into the Mockingbird. From this, there are troubling implications. What Sarang had said gave people hope of a way out, and it sounded rational enough to convince them that it was real. The versions of them uploaded to the scan will believe it worked, but after they had killed themselves, they had truly merged and got into the Ark. In reality, there was now a dead version of them that had to be cleaned up and buried. This failed attempt to merge, to beat the rapid divergence from their virtual clone, had the collateral of the morale and mental well-being of their colleagues. It comes to a point where they have to stop the brain scans because so many people are killing themselves.
Strasky, come in. I need help in the lab, the scan room.
What happened?
Conrad killed himself after the scan.
Jesus, how?
Maser tool. What should I do?
I'm gonna need to tell Strohmeyer.
No, please. I'm so close. Strohmeyer's gonna shut down the ARC project. It's not my fault people keep killing themselves.
Catherine, what are you gonna do? It's not like you can sneak a 300-pound body out of the lab.
I know.
Catherine, are you okay?
Not even close.
Sarang was unequivocally wrong, and the price for this perilous leap of faith was measured in the weight of despair upon his surviving comrades, and the weight of the corpses such an idea amassed. Soma presents a world in which the supposedly immutable and complex essence of the human being is as easily copied and uploaded as a YouTube video. That who we are ultimately melts down to a brain scan. Suddenly the question of what it means to be human doesn't seem to be as easy as it was when presented with a shambling animalistic horror as the only comparison. A lot of videos tend to take more of a physical focus in trying to explore this question. I can understand why it's so consistently under the lens. I mean, how can you ignore Simon looking like this? The mirror scene is really freaky to watch, and it unsettles our own ideas on what it means to be a human. But I think this observation only really serves to examine that division of mind and body Sarang was so adamant about. That maybe it says something about our mind that you can trade up biological machinery for robotic machinery, and we still retain the same sentience and personality we always had. There are loads of characters in media that physically aren't human, but we still acknowledge and relate to them as people because of how they act, behave, and communicate. Some of the most beloved characters in video games aren't technically human. BT from Titanfall 2, Claptrap from Borderlands, GLaDOS from Portal, literally every character from Undertale and Deltarune, Blue Gnome from Everhood, The Fire from Deadbolt, Pluto from Amori, The Turtle from Elden Ring, fucking Cloud. None of these characters are technically human, but we can recognize and respect them as people. I mean, goddamn, everyone wants to fuck Blythe from Elden Ring, so clearly physical form isn't the determining factor in seeing someone as a person.
I'm not a furry, but I do find Blythe kind of hot. I mean, I'm not a furry, and I find you quite hot.
I'm jacking off to that.
What tends to be overlooked when interrogating this question is a scene between Simon and Catherine outside Omicron. As you're trying to find a way to deactivate the building's lockdown, Simon says something to Catherine.
Catherine, are we alive?
That's an impossible question to answer. We lack meaningful definitions.
I just figured there must be a way to know. To know if this life is worth living.
You assume you've changed so much, but have you really?
I don't know. I don't feel so different. But the world sure does. I never realized how much the idea of myself depended on where I am.
How do you mean?
I miss Toronto. Not because my friends and family are there, but because I know where I fit in. In Toronto, I know who I am.
That's an interesting observation.
Two key phrases. Whether it's worth living this life, and how much the idea of the self is dependent on where you are. This is surprisingly overlooked by a lot of people who played this game, myself included on my first playthrough. It takes the question away from can a box be a human if it showcases sentience, and instead focuses on the idea of humane living. Could someone like Simon live a human life as he is this far away from the place that he believes defines him? This, to me, is something the game focuses upon more so with the difficult decisions you come across in the game. When you reach the tram station, you find that the power is out. After a quick walk down a tunnel, you come across the breaker room. The moment you enter, someone cries out for help. It's Amy Azaro, a wounded woman. She tells you that she was injured while attempting to reroute the power, and that nothing is allowed to die. Every word she delivers is done so with both the terror of death and the persisting pain of the alternative. The WoW is keeping her alive through a set of external lungs. Nothing is allowed to die, even if it means that it lives in a constant state of agitation without the ability to move. The WoW's definition of human living is this. In order to progress with the game, you need to unplug one of the cords the WoW is using to sap power for Amy's life support. Doing this hurts her. Her eyes roll up into her head as the lung's rhythm stutters and stumbles. There's enough power to use the tram to get to Lambda, but Amy will be left here, living in this state that the WoW sees as human, asking that you get help from people that are long since dead. Like many other players who got through this part of the game, I think I made a good choice here.
Oh, fuck.
When you get to Theta to access the Dumbat, you need a security cipher to get in. In one of the labs Catherine worked at is a storage of brain scans. Most are broken, but one is still intact and can be used. It's that of a Mr. Brandon 1, a security staff member of Theta that was scanned long before your arrival, and you later find out he's been long dead too.
You won't get me, motherfuckers! You hear me?
When he awakes, he's confused by the void around him, and very rapidly becomes stressed, believing that Catherine's efforts to extract the cipher are nothing but the WoW's attempts to deceive him. You repeatedly turn him on and off, essentially resetting him to that very moment after he completed his scan. Once you're done with the interrogation, you have the option to leave his brain scan there, or to delete the data and prevent it from ever being used. Would it be a fulfilling human existence to be sitting on a disc waiting to be plugged in, or would it be better to destroy it so that he can rest permanently, and that none can access it? It's perhaps an easier decision than Amy's. Either way, he's not going to know the difference. But it still seats you with a steady unease that the culmination of a person is able to be plugged in and restarted like footage from a video camera. It's especially unsettling to think that Dr. Munchie may have been unknowingly doing this to hundreds of versions of Simon in 2015. The only difference is that he didn't have a screen to watch each Simon die when the treatment inevitably failed. When you visit Tau, you discover that the team never proceeded with the launch. They had walked the damn thing from the plateau and taken it down to the ocean floor, but turned around once they got to Omega. Shepherding the Ark, chaperoning humanity's last chance, had given them purpose in a world devoid of it. To launch it into space would be to finally admit that this life was no longer worth living. Most are dead once you find them. The last stragglers of Paphos 2 picked off one by starvation and sickness. Some are in a state of existence that only the WoW could manufacture. But there's one surviving soul you're yet to stumble across. Making your way up to the infirmary to retrieve the Ark, you find a human. Living, breathing, talking, and sentient. Sarah Lindwall, payload technician. She's been there on life support for a while, the last vestige of a research facility, and she's guarding the Ark from the WoW. You speak to her and let her know that she's the last surviving human of Paphos 2. With the surface barren and the atmosphere toxic, this only means that Sarah Lindwall is possibly the last surviving member of the human species. She lets you take the Ark and only asks one thing of you: that you kill her and stay while she passes. It's an easy decision to make. In actuality, I'd argue it's not really a decision to make at all. She's made up her mind as to how she wants to die, and it's not your place to subvert that wish for her in a world as barren as 2104. This isn't to say, however, it's not harrowing, and Simon's responses convey that. Sarah Lindwall is the last tangible surviving person on the planet. Is it human for her, for the species, to die so unceremoniously in a chair at the bottom of the ocean? Equally, is it human for her to be left there to wither away until life support cannot sustain her anymore? Is it human to leave her poised below the WoW's growing influence and be mutated into some agonized abomination to service its malformed definition of life? I think the answer's clear.
Would you stay with me, please? It won't be long now. Please, just stay. What a crazy thing this was. Life. At least I won't have to turn 30. Hooray! Wish I could have died at home with my friends. You ever been to Greenland? It's very beautiful. Well, at least when you get out of the city. Nanook is busy, and yes, there's like 12 million people trying to get around, but it's a great place. Or rather, it was a great place before the comet ended it all. You know what? I prefer it this way. I liked Paphos. Liked my colleagues, Ian, Nick, Jasper, even Catherine. People thought she was weird because she was quiet, but she was cool. Simon, you still there?
I'm here, Sarah.
Don't let him die, okay? Send them out there to the stars.
Towards the end of the game, you have to carve a path through a furtive location known as Site Alpha. It's overgrown with WoW tentacles and bulbs, the architecture rendered unrecognizable as every inch is covered by its cancerous influence. You're here because of this man, Johan Ross. He's a Carthage Industries employee that was one of the few sole operators of the WoW. He had watched as it had broken free from its capsule and spread violently, making his reports on how it devastated Site Alpha. On his way to Omicron to warn fellow Carthage employees, he's mortally wounded by the wildlife and falls into a coma on the climber. He was placed inside a containment cell, and over the coming days, the staff experienced horrid headaches and technological failures from the WoW manipulating electromagnetic fields to resuscitate the unconscious doctor. As a result of his healing, Johan Ross developed an almost telepathic ability to speak into people's black boxes implanted in their brain. This is how he tries to warn Raleigh Herbert and get her to go down into Alpha to kill the WoW. Before she can do so, the WoW overloads the black boxes of all Omicron staff, blowing their heads off. When we arrive at Omicron, we're being stalked by him. He keeps telling us that we have to destroy it, that it must be stopped, and by the time you get to Site Alpha, he explains how you're going to do it. One of the components you use to access the power suit is a tainted structure gel that is altered to act as a form of poison. If the WoW's heart takes it in, it'll spread it across the facility and kill all traces. All that it involves is engaging in dubious sexual activity once more. The question rears its head. Is it humane for this thing to be perpetuating life under a malformed definition? Is it right that it continues to upload brain scans to tainted vessels and prolong the suffering of countless people? Is it any more humane to destroy it and compromise the contented lives of those that it does sustain? During Acre's rampage through Theta, he would trap those he caught in something called mind coral, some concoction of biological material and structure gel that traps the victim in place and induces comatose dreams. Acres was originally meant to have voice lines during his encounter talking about putting you to sleep, of living in a paradise and escaping the desolate real world. Simon gets caught by Acres and gets put in a mind coral scenario of his own. He's back in his apartment and Ashley is alive, talking about how they fell in love and were a couple. It's Simon's own fever dream. We know he was secretly in love with her, and even Simon seems to doubt such a bizarre situation. The WoW was able to keep people in some comatose dream paradise, a place where they would live in the old world without even knowing the fate that would befall Earth in 2104. And they all sound remarkably happy. Alice Costa, Brandon 1's girlfriend that Catherine impersonates, dreams of when she first met Brandon and the necklace he gave her. Strohmeyer, the facility's security leader, dreams of spending time shooting the shit over beer with someone called Doug. Matthew Frost dreams of discovering life beyond Earth, and Javid Goya dreams of just beating Acres at chess. Is this humane living? If they're happy, would it be right to kill the WoW and let them die? Is it human living to be in the exact situation Amy Azaro was, but this time they aren't cognizant of their atrophying bodies? It's a far more primitive and harmful alternative to the Ark, yet simultaneously it implies that the WoW may be learning, experimenting. It even creates its own virtual world called the Vivarium. Is it right to destroy the WoW and stop all these potential opportunities from developing into anything meaningful? Is it right to shut down Earth's last chance of creating physical and tangible human sentience? And then comes the home run for Soma. In my opinion, this moment, along with the ending, is the unexplored peak of video game storytelling. All of these other moments we've spoken about are great, they're fantastic, but this was a different level entirely. Throughout the game, you come to the understanding that brain scans can be duplicated or uploaded multiple times. It's likely that a mockingbird of an individual and the original individual existed at the same time. Episodes of the Soma live-action series Transmissions show exactly that. You could amass an army of Simons with the only limiting factor being the availability of appropriate physical vessels to contain them. This isn't directly said, and it's more so something that you just come to learn as you go through the game. By the time you arrive at Omicron, you're 2/3 through the story. In order to descend the climate and traverse the abyss, Simon needs to use a Haimatsu power suit to withstand the crushing pressure. Catherine explains that this will require him sitting in a pilot seat and being uploaded into the suit once he has the Cortex chip. Simon is hesitant, but when Catherine offers to go in his place, virtually leaving him behind, he accepts. He sits down in the pilot seat, and this happens.
It's like having your picture taken.
Well, with the most expensive camera in the world.
You know, Indians thought photos would steal their souls.
In this case, they'd be right.
There must be something wrong. Can't you run a diagnosis or something?
What was that?
No, it's just,
Why was it still talking?
it's the same like before.
Catherine, why was he still talking?
That's how it works, you know that.
What do you mean?
You know it's not magic. You were copied. The sleeping Simon in the seat was copied, and now you are here, just like Simon lived on in Toronto.
God damn you, Kath. 2 Simons? There can't be 2 Simons.
What did you think would happen?
That you were gonna take my mind and put it into another body, like a brain transplant.
I'm sorry, it wouldn't work that way.
You realize how messed up this is?
Please, I didn't mean to upset you.
How did you expect me to react to this shit?
Please stop.
You're fucking disgusting. What's gonna happen to him?
He'll sleep for a while, a few days.
And then what? Wake up in this fucking nightmare again? All alone? So cruel.
Well, what do you want me to do with him? Make friends? Let him know that we have to leave him behind when we go into the abyss?
What if he didn't need to wake up?
You'd do that?
I don't know. Maybe.
There. I set it up for you. Hit the switch if you want to drain his battery. He'll die within a minute. I'd rather not stay plugged in any longer.
It's evident that Catherine is hardly trustworthy of Simon's mental stability, and was going to administer a sedative while Simon was in the chair, so once the copy was created and uploaded to the Haimatsu power suit, the new Simon wouldn't realise that he was a copy. He'd believe that he was the only Simon. That sedative evidently hadn't kicked in nearly fast enough. Those few words of mild confusion are enough to make it startlingly apparent to both Simon and the player that you were but a doppelganger. And now you stand in front of yourself, another version of yourself, knowing that he has to stay there. When I first played this, I was completely blindsided. The game had done such a brilliant job of keeping me immersed in the ongoing events that I was left stunned from how suddenly you get hit with this. Even on my second playthrough, all I could do was stand in front of Simon and watch him sit there unconscious. Watch him shift in his chair as he breathed. Watch the red lights of his eyes glow as he sat oblivious to how he had been tricked and replaced. You have to go down the climber and into the abyss. There is no alternative. This is your mission. And he can't come with you. He wouldn't survive the pressures. This means that you have to make a cruel decision. One option is that you leave Simon there and continue on. He'll wake up alone and without Catherine, left to go insane while wondering if she had betrayed him. He'll never be able to leave and find solace in friendship with his little robot buddy from before, because he doesn't have the Omnitool to open doors anymore, and even if he did, the robot fiend that chased him in there will be waiting outside. He has no means of traversing this world, and will spend the rest of his life confined to a small chamber without company, activity, or purpose. The alternative is that you drain his battery while he's asleep, and you kill him. At first, it seems easy. Kill him while he's asleep, he won't even feel the terror of having it coming, and you get to continue on. But it's not that simple. This Simon, this version of Simon that awoke in Upsilon thinking he had completed a step in the recovery of a life stolen from him by a car accident, had suffered so much. We had suffered so much. We were in tandem with him every step of the way, from confusion to fear to hope to anger. It was disorienting to gaze upon what had carried me so far through the game and stand in front of what would kill him within a minute. The game had masterfully kept me immersed to such a degree that killing another version of a fictional me was dizzying. Even as I watch back through the footage and write this script, I feel uneasy. It comes back to that question, brought forward in a striking scenario. Is it human to live inside a chamber of an abandoned underwater facility with no companions, no entertainment, and no freedom? Is it human to be left with a persisting thought that you had been crossed by your only compatriot until it drives you to a point of insanity that eventually kills you from the insurmountable stress? Is it human for Simon Jarrett, thousands of miles from his home in Toronto, to confront a life not worth living in a place that he will never know or belong in? Is it any more human, any more affording of the dignity we associate with being human, for the man that carried the mission so far through peril to die in a chair where no one will even know he existed? Is it human to die after being made to look like a complete fool, tricked by the one person he thought was his friend because he didn't want to risk the stress of knowing too much, compromising his dedication to the mission? There are few words to describe the winding sensation of guilt I was feeling during this moment. To stand in front of another version of me that had carried the torch of humanity's last hope this far, only to kill him, to kill me so unceremoniously, felt alien. No other game has elicited such discomfort and dread in such profound quantity. It felt wrong to make this decision for someone that was their own agent of thought and volition, someone who at least deserved to know the odds before making such a permanent choice. I couldn't help but think about how I'd feel from that perspective. Would I want a new copy of myself to switch me off when I'm not even conscious to appreciate my final moments? Would I want another version of me to make a decision on my own life and snuff me out with my last thoughts being that I failed? In my first playthrough, I just couldn't bring myself to do it. Maybe I'd be able to come back for him. Maybe he would find a way out. Maybe he would be able to make sense of this new world and discover a place in which he could be his own Simon Jarrett. I left Omicron trusting that he could carve out a human meaning in this hellscape seemingly devoid of one. But on my second playthrough, knowing what the future would bring, I made a difficult call. After a solid 6 hours of playtime, you finally arrive at Phi, the place where the Omega space gun is stationed. You've learned things you never thought possible, experienced things likely to sit with you forever, and traversed obstacles of increasing severity and lethality. But despite all of that, here you are, the end to the tragedy and horror. As you move through the facility in the hopes of getting it up and running again for one last launch, you spy a corpse in the munitions chamber. A corpse that you soon realize is Catherine Chun.
Are you suggesting we keep it down here? Doesn't that defeat the whole purpose? Eternity among the stars, remember?
The people inside the Ark won't know the difference. We can just keep it down here, and we don't have to risk the Ark being shot through 5,000 meters of broken barrel, and then push through another 100,000 meters of a dust-filled atmosphere.
Will the casing stand all that pressure?
Well, the odds aren't great.
Catherine, say something.
I don't care what you think. I'm launching it.
No need to be like that. Let's just hang on to it for a while and think about it. We can launch it later.
No, that wasn't the deal. We made it to save them. To launch it. Out there, it's hope. Down here, it's a fucking terrarium waiting to die with the rest of us.
Come on, Catherine. It's not asking much. Let's just think about it before we risk the only hope humanity has to survive this hell.
No, we launch it today. This is my project, my Ark.
It's bigger than that. Don't you get it? It's not for you to decide. We're talking about the fate of mankind.
Get away from the Ark! I'm taking it.
No, you're not.
I'm not gonna let you ruin this.
Stop it!
Guys, calm down.
Get away from me! No!
What did you do?
It was an accident.
Catherine, talk to me. Catherine.
Oh God. Catherine.
Did you say something?
It's you. You had an accident.
What do you... Oh. You mean Catherine. Don't worry, it's better this way.
For once, Catherine finally seems less of a presumptuous science teacher.
How could they kill me?
Catherine.
I know I'm not an easy person to like. I just thought they trusted me.
Come on, don't do this to yourself.
But this doesn't matter. How can it when you're at the finish line, when a life full of new possibilities awaits you beyond the facility? You pack the Ark into the shell and send it along its way. You walk out into the launch dome as the machinery powers on, sets of lights flickering into life for one last flight. You're tense, but you're ready to bring this to an end. You're happy that Simon will finally get the new life he had wanted since 2015. That humanity will enjoy life among the stars in a virtual paradise as good as the real thing, if not better. Catherine tells you that the brain scan will be uploaded when we initiate the launch sequence. All it takes is a push. But I didn't push it right away. The game had made the weight of such a moment apparent throughout the entire game, and sitting at the brink of winning, of giving meaning to all the suffering you had endured, proved so mesmerizing. I had to appreciate all of what I and Simon had accomplished for a moment. No more brain hemorrhage, no more Mr. Meatball Man acres, no more killing people, no more questions about what we are. An ending for Simon that justified all that he had suffered. And then I hit the button. Whoa, no.
Time.
Oh shit.
20 seconds.
I'm not gonna make it.
What's the
not
matter
gonna
with
make
the
it.
upload?
Just give it a second.
Thought you guys would have better bandwidth in the future.
It's not gonna work. No. No. No, no. Simon.
10 seconds. 9.
No.
8.
Come on.
7.
No. Come on.
6.
No.
5.
No.
4.
No. 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 That's not me. That's the... No. No. No.
I'm still here.
No. No. No.
I'm still here.
No.
Catherine? Catherine?
No.
I'm here.
No.
What the hell happened?
Oh.
What went wrong?
Nothing.
Shit.
They're out there, among the stars. We're here.
No.
But I'm me.
We were getting on the Ark. I saw it. It finished loading just before it launched.
Yeah, I saw.
Then why are we still here?
Simon, I can't keep telling you how it works. You won't listen. You know why we're here. You were copied onto the Ark. You just didn't carry over. You lost the coin toss. We both did. Just like Simon and Omicron, just like the man who died in Toronto 100 years ago.
Fuck.
This is bullshit. We came all this way. We launched the Ark.
I know it sucks, but our copies are up there. Catherine
You
and Simon
fucker.
are both safe on the Ark. Be happy
You
for them.
fucker.
Crazy.
You fuck.
We're gonna die down here with those fuckers living at large on a spaceship. They're not us. They're not us.
I'm sorry you feel that way,
Fuck.
Simon.
No, but I
I'm
was meant
proud
to
of what
go
we
on
did.
there.
We made sure that something of the hundreds of thousands of years of human history survives, that something lives on.
Oh, fuck this. Fuck. Fuck this. Fuck you. Fuck you, Catherine. You lied. And I believed in you. I trusted you. You said we're getting on the fucking Ark.
We are on the Ark, you idiot! I didn't lie. I can't be responsible for your goddamn ignorance. You
Fuck!
Fuck, man. Are you fucking serious? No.
Please don't leave me alone.
No.
Catherine?
Fuck.
Catherine?
Are you fucking serious? You can't. No. You fucking can't. No.
It's safe to say that just like Simon, I hadn't been paying attention to the signs. Most people that get to the end are already bracing for this moment. They already know the rude awakening Simon will receive once the Ark is launched, but I was so immersed and enraptured in this tale that it completely flew over my head. Not because it wasn't explained well, but because I was so involved, so excited for Simon to get his happy ending, that I hadn't been as attentive as I should have been. As Simon finally cracks under the pressure of all he had survived, realizing he had suffered for nothing, the Simon on board the Ark awakes to a paradise of sprawling greenery and foliage, of sun-kissed meadows and a babbling brook beside him. From his perspective, he had made it. He survived the journey. Either because he's oblivious or because he's still suppressing his mind, he doesn't acknowledge the Simon that is stranded on a desolate earth with no purpose. It only gets worse the longer that you think about it, because Simon is now alone. Catherine died when the Cortex chip in the Omnitool shorted, essentially destroying the uploaded brain scan along with it. She flew into rage for the first time ever throughout the game after Simon had accused her of lying and deceiving him, a sentiment that many fellow staff members on Paphos 2 had felt in lieu of the brain scan suicides. It's likely because of how true she may have realized it was. Simon may have ignored some of the signs, but Catherine hardly helped point them out. When Simon was in the Theta lab and inquired as to how he would be able to use the Haimatsu power suit, she lied that he could just slip it on over him because she knew explaining he'd have to be copied would risk him not going any further. She tried to sedate the Simon at Omicron before he could speak as to not alarm the new Simon. And when it didn't work, she became sheepish and timid as if Simon was wrong to be angry that she had tried to hide it from him. And even after this, she still lies about the coin toss, the idea that Simon had a chance of being carried over into the Ark when there was none. She knew it was a copy and paste of Simon's brain, but continued to obscure the truth for as long as possible to ensure that the Ark launched, a mixed motivation of saving whatever she could of humanity, and also of it being her idea that, in her eyes, had to prevail at any cost. Who does that remind you of? It's morbidly fitting how both versions of Catherine die during the one moment of their life that they flew into anger, arguably killed by their colleagues. Simon's case is tragically the same. We play as 3 versions of Simon throughout the entirety of the game, 4 if you count the post-credits scene. Each of these versions essentially dies just as Simon from Toronto had. He started to feel hope at a new life, that he had never felt more excited to be alive, and then at the last moment it all fell apart and he perished. Simon and Omicron sat in that pilot seat thinking he was taking the next step to saving humanity and to his own salvation, only to fall unconscious thinking something had malfunctioned. Simon at Phi cheered and whooped as the brain scan was completed, assuming he had made it onto the Ark, only to watch the satellite be shot into orbit while he still sat in the chair that had initiated its permanent departure. And there is no escape for him now. He cannot traverse Paphos 2 anymore. His Omnitool is broken, and the facility's power has been completely drained by the last launch. Simon Jarrett is trapped at the bottom of the ocean floor, with no friends, no purpose, and no way to make the world around him a place that he can fit in. And I think that's the last question this game asks you. Was it worth it? Perhaps at first it seems easy to answer. The Ark is a virtual paradise that can last tens of thousands of years in space. It's established to be better than the real thing. Taking one look at the wasteland of Paphos 2 is hardly an incentive to want to stick around. But when you think about how many people died for this to be launched, how many people suffered for an idea none were sure as good as promised, just for a handful of staff members to make it on, was this the only way to carve out a humane living? Was it worth stranding 2 versions of Simon and leaving them to their miserable ends so that one Simon and a handful of others could get to live on in paradise? Was it worth lying to Simon and stringing him along, obscuring the truth and torturing him with sudden revelations as to the nature of his existence that Catherine never bothered to stop and fully explain? Is this a question of making the best of an awful situation, or a question of people clinging to the idea of a theoretically perfect happy ending? Was it impossible to have carved out a humane living at the bottom of the ocean? Was it a worthwhile trade-off to have sacrificed so many physical and tangible people, Mockingbird or not, to ensure a virtual world harboring a tiny number of people survived? I think your answer is dependent on which version of Simon sits with you most. The Simon enjoying the splendor of his new life on the Ark, or the Simon sitting at Phi realizing that the happy ending he had wanted since 2015 had always been impossible. I have spent an insane number of pages of this cumbersome script describing to you how Soma interrogates the criteria of what we perceive to be human existence and identity. Whenever I'm doing videos, I'm usually talking about a game's design, or describing my own anecdotes as to why I like or dislike a certain piece of media. I've never done this before with a book, a movie, or a game. And it's because I was enraptured from the macro to the micro. The fact that the game's name, Soma, biologically refers to the body of a cell, which ties into Mark Sarang's whole idea of how the brain scans of a Mockingbird and the original diverge on a cellular level. The fact that Simon says the same line about cameras stealing souls when he gets scanned both times. The fact that the body inside the Haimatsu power suit, Raleigh Herber, is the one Simon uses to hike to Site Alpha and contemplate destroying it like she was originally intending to do. The fact that each death scene changes based on what optional things you interacted with. This image will only appear if you've seen yourself in the mirror in Theta, and this image only appears after you've realized you're in the body of Imogen Reed. Soma is so fantastically written, so masterfully constructed, so subtly stitched together, and so overtly startling in what it presents, that from the moment I sat down in Dr. Munchie's chair to the moment I beat Soma, I was at the whim of the excellent writing. There is such love and passion for this narrative that exists beyond just exploiting existentialism for petty shock value, that there was a desire to seriously investigate a question and make it entertaining through the form of a video game. Telling this story as a book or a movie would never do that troubling scene at Omicron justice. It wouldn't work to disturb you if you weren't essentially killing another version of yourself. Think about the last time a game like this has gripped you this way, how it has offered a narrative foreground that is palatable and motivating enough to encourage you to explore what's going on in the thematic background. A game so interesting that there are entire sections of wiki dedicated to tracking the movements of Paphos 2 employees we never even hear from, let alone see their corpses. Think about the stupid shit we're constantly spoon-fed now. Remakes of classic titles that only exist to bank on nostalgia to fill up a vacancy of original ideas. An industry that charges you premium price for fuck all. Games that aren't finished on release and ultimately aren't even fun to play by the time they're patched into a finished condition. A business practice of shedding compelling narratives and instead providing vapid sandboxes for a customer base of serotonin junkies who can only be engaged by constant flashing numbers and text on screen. Franchises that are kept only alive by sticky tape and spit, maintaining relevance by appealing to people that hate life enough that they'll keep buying the next edition in an attempt to relive better days that are way gone, even if the game itself is complete garbage. Not every game needs to be a contemplation of some grand question. Not every game needs to provide the narrative equivalent of sounding yourself with a chainsaw. But God, I take one look around and all I see are flashy exercises in neuron activation. The last game that actually made my brain activate was Darkest Dungeon, because every time I see the Duchess, my eyes bulge out of my skull and I start hitting the table like a fucking cartoon character.
I would love to get my hands on a pair of those Milky Wilky.
Ubisoft literally charges you money for these things called time savers in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, something that essentially lets you skip the grind. The current state of the gaming industry is people are paying more money to play less of the games they are buying at premium price. Do you see why I am not exactly optimistic of the creative industry anymore? Soma is a masterfully written gem that deserved so much more. It deserved more acclaim when it came out, it deserved far more recognition from people as the years passed, and it deserves to be remembered as a prime example of what this medium can achieve from a narrative standpoint. Soma is a spectacle, a wondrously bleak one, and I can only hope that this video did it justice in explaining that from narrative and mechanical standpoints, this game is a gem that belongs in a display case for all to see and remember fondly. A game that deserves to live among the stars.
The new normal, familiar path, different place. You've donned yesterday's smile, decorate your new face.
God, that was long, huh? An hour and 40 minutes of me talking. I'm honestly impressed you survived because I had to take breaks going back through it. Thank you very much for watching through all of that. I'm aware it was a cumbersome upload and I've been talking about it since February, so what's it going on, like 4 months now? But anyway, now it's here and hopefully it did justice for a game like Soma that deserved so much more acclaim than it got at launch. We're really close to 1,000 subscribers, so hopefully this omnibus package of a video will be enough to push me over. I have some fun ideas I want to do for hitting 1,000 subs, but even if I don't, I had a blast making this either way. I'm unsure if I'm going to be able to get in an upload for next month. My brother's wedding is coming up, and that's going to be going on in Italy, so it's a good bit of time I'll be out of the UK for. Additionally, for the time I am going to be here, I'm working on my second book in the Vosh Draymar series, and I've got to make sure that it's all prim and proper for release so I don't tank the little intrigue it has before we're even halfway through the saga. Not to mention I'm trying to get back into my shitty drawing so I actually get good at drawing. It's a lot of time being eaten up for sure. I also won't be making a video of this size like this for a long time. You know, I'm not H-Bomber guy, I don't have the stamina or the audience for projects this big. This was just a special occasion, and it was a game I really thought needed this kind of in-depth investigation, almost. I'm just making it clear that YouTube isn't really my life right now, and honestly the channel isn't big enough for that to even be a consideration. And god, the sacrifices I have to make in my file storage, like my data, is insane. Like the amount of footage I had to get and had sitting on my computer since like February, it's taken up like half of the space on my computer. So it's going to be finally nice to just get rid of that and enjoy it for like games and stuff. So that I think I also want to take a bit of a break for that reason as well, just to finally enjoy the space I have on my computer. But yeah, it's all of this really isn't something that's going to be stopping me, because I have so many more ideas for videos down the line, and my passion is the same as it was when I started, so yeah, the only way this channel is going to stop is me dying. So unless that happens at some point, I'm going to be around for quite a while. Thanks to all of these people who follow me on Twitch. The link's going to be in the description if you'd like to go check out the streams. We're currently playing through Darkest Dungeon right now. Discord invite is back up on the channel, so if you want to join the community, which is a wonderfully inclusive space for people who like all things Smug Rubric or just want a place to hang out with like-minded folk, that's going to be available in the About section of the channel. I hope you've had a good day, I hope you had a great Pride Month, and I hope you enjoyed Soma as much as I did. Grazie di tutto. Ciao.